everybody, and welcome to the channel. In today's video, we have esteemed astrologer Raymond Merriman presenting on War and Renaissance outer planet ingresses. As a reminder, our spring semester term is coming up. We offer classes from beginner to intermediate to advanced, and we also offer our full diploma program as well as certified programs and individual classes. So if you'd like to learn more, please visit KeplerCollege.org. And without further ado, let's get into the video.
Well, today's presentation is on War and Renaissance, the outer planet ingresses. And as I say, I'm very happy to see everyone today, and I understand we're going to have over 1,000 people in attendance to view these presentations by these excellent presenters, in addition to myself. So today I'm going to start with an overview of the next 3 years. And this was covered in great detail in the book that I wrote this year called Forecast for 2023. And this particular segment that I'm presenting today is from a section called The Signs They Are A-Changin' from 2023 to 2025. And as you know, as astrologers, this is a very unique time when the 3 outermost planets will be changing signs. You have Pluto ingressing into Aquarius, well, very, very soon, March 23rd. And that's going to last until March of 2043. So it's going to be a 20-year ingress. The second one is Neptune entering Aries. That will begin March 30th, 2025. And it will continue back and forth, but mostly through Aries until May 21st, 2038. Long time, 13, 14 years. And the final outer planet that I'll be discussing mostly today is Uranus entering Gemini. That will first take place on July 7th, 2025, and it will remain there, well, mostly there, through August 1st, 2032. Now, even the fourth outermost planet, Saturn, is also changing signs, as you know. In fact, it just did it, 12 days ago, March 7th. And it will be entering Aries in 2025. So 2 times between 2023 and 2025, we're going to see Saturn go through the last sign of the zodiac and the first sign. So this is very, very unique. There's the Saturn conjunct Neptune, which is where everything is going to end up. As you have these 3 outermost planets, and even Saturn, changing signs, they all culminate in 2026, February 20th, 2026, when both Saturn and Neptune will re-enter. They go back and forth over 0 Aries, but they're going to re-enter 0 Aries and form their conjunction. So with that in mind, the entire period of 2023 to 2026 is highlighted as a major shift in the consciousness of the collective. And in fact, it's a shift in the nature and direction of human activity. Now, let me explain this from the cosmic perspective, why this is likely and what this means. Andre Barbault, one of the most well-known mundane astrologers of our era, made this statement I'm going to quote from the book that was printed, Planetary Cycles, Mundane Astrology, translated by Kate Johnson of the Astrological Association of Great Britain in 2016. And he stated that the next conjunction of Saturn and Neptune in 2026 is centrally placed at the beginning of Aries. In fact, it's 0 Aries. And it's in a triangular quartet of planets with a double sextile to the trine, as you can see here, between Uranus and Pluto. Okay, so here's Uranus-Pluto trine. You can see Uranus is, Pluto is entering Aquarius. Uranus is about to enter Gemini. And right in between is the Saturn-Neptune. So he thought that this is the most benefic configuration of this century. And as interplanetary partnership will work for the best in a splendid launch of civilization. Very high words coming from a very powerful and a very well-known and influential mundane astrologer. So Pluto and Aquarius is the first of these that we're going to talk about. Pluto enters Aquarius 2023 to 2043, 2023 to 2043. The image I have here was created by my wife, Antonia Langsdorff Merriman, and it depicts the sign of Aquarius and the planet Pluto. But it also portrays a change in the wave frequencies or the level of our interaction with one another. So we're in the process now of changing how we communicate with one another in the next 20 years, as if in a new wave frequency. Now, I'm not sure exactly what that means or what the result will be, but I'm very certain that things are going to be very different 20 years from now than they are today as we begin this transit of Pluto ingressing into Aquarius. Politically, well-known German astrologer Christoph Niederwieser, if I understand him correctly, suggests that we're going to enter a period of techno-cyber socialism. I think that's a very good term for Pluto entering Aquarius. I can see the symbolism of that. I think it means that we connect with one another on different wave frequencies than we're aware of today. It's all very symbolically exciting. But we don't really know exactly what this means just yet. But we're going to find out in the next 20 years as Pluto, which is a planet of reform, transits through Aquarius, the sign of the future and innovation. So this is truly an era that if we can imagine it, it's possible with technology. Pluto and Aquarius. So Pluto is going to enter Aquarius on March 23rd, 2023. That's just what? This week, 4 days from now. So in order to understand these dynamics, let's look back at the last time each of these outermost planets ingress into the same signs they're going to ingress into in the next 2 years, and see if through this process we can identify a common theme. So we begin with Pluto entering Aquarius at 8:14 a.m. on March 23rd, Washington, D.C. That's Eastern Standard Time. Okay. And you can see the chart here. You got the sun just past Neptune with Mercury, Jupiter, Moon, all in Aries. In the 12th house in Washington, D.C., Pluto is culminating. Now, let's go back to the last time that Pluto entered Aquarius. That was on April 4th, 1777, and it lasted until April 11th, 1797. So you can see that Pluto's orbit around the sun is about 248 years. Now we know from history that the last time that Pluto entered Aquarius was a very revolutionary time throughout the world. We had our own U.S. Revolution that started just 9 months before in July of 1776, and it lasted through September 3rd, 1783. We know the French Revolution started May 5th, 1789, and it lasted through November 9th, 1799. So those were two of the major revolutions that altered the course of the human direction. Okay. Now you'll notice in this chart where Uranus is. Uranus at this time was in 8 degrees of Gemini. And note where Neptune is. Neptune was in late Virgo, about to enter Libra. Okay, late Virgo, enter Libra. So I want you to remember this. Uranus is just entered Gemini. Neptune is in late Virgo, about to enter 0 Libra. Okay, now let's look at the second one. The second planet, outermost planet, is Neptune. And it enters 0 degrees Aries on March 30th, 2025. And that would be at 8 a.m. in Washington, D.C. Again, notice all the planets in the 12th house. Uranus is rising, Pluto's culminating. Okay. And you'll notice you got Mercury, Venus, and Neptune all within a degree, and well, about a degree, almost 2 degrees, very close. And it's just following, I believe this is, this is a solar eclipse that's happening at that time. In fact, it happened at 9, the day before is the solar eclipse, okay, on March 30th, 2025. I'm sorry, the day before would be the 29th. Now, what happened the last time that Neptune entered Aries? Well, Neptune is a 164-year cycle, and the date that it entered Aries last time was April 13th, 1861. That was just one day after the start of the Civil War, April 12th, 1861. Now, what I want you to notice on this chart is where Uranus is. Uranus is 9 degrees of Gemini. And notice that Pluto has moved into a fixed sign. Okay, Pluto is in, Pluto's not culminating, well, that was the other chart. It was this one, here's Pluto's just entering Taurus. So Pluto enters a fixed sign. Uranus is again in the early part of Gemini. Neptune's entering Aries. Okay. Now, let's look at the next planet. This is Uranus entering Gemini on July 7th, 2025. Okay. Uranus, as you know, has an 84-year cycle. And on the time that it enters Gemini, you're going to find that Uranus is in a trine to Pluto in Aquarius. You'll also notice that Saturn and Neptune, as we talked about earlier, is forming a double sextile. Okay, so you got a nice aspect here, double sextiles, consecutive sextiles, while Saturn is trine Uranus. There's also an interesting one here. The Saturn-Neptune is square to Jupiter. Okay, that could be an important factor to look at when we get into this aspect. But now let's look at the last time that Uranus entered Gemini. Okay, the 84-year cycle of Uranus entered Gemini. It enters July 7th, 2025. No, that was August 7th, 1941 was the last time. But the last time it happened, August 7th, 1941, 5 months later, the U.S. was attacked in Pearl Harbor, and thus began World War II. So each of these ingresses, well, let me go back here a second. I didn't finish that part here. There's something else to notice here. You'll notice that Saturn's conjunct Uranus, but the thing I want to point out is Neptune. Again, it's in late Virgo, early Libra. Okay, you might begin to see a theme developing here. So each of these planetary ingresses into the signs that are going to enter between 2023 and 2025 coincided with the onset of the 3 most important wars in U.S. history within months. In the case of Neptune, it was within only 1 day. Each of these dates in the past had Uranus in the first decanate of Gemini. Each of these dates in the past and the ones coming up have Neptune near the Aries-Libra axis, give or take 10 degrees. So this is more than just a coincidence or random correspondence, because the orbital cycles of these planets is 84 years in the case of Uranus, 164 years in the case of Neptune, 248 years in the case of Pluto. So I cannot imagine a more synchronistic cosmic display of a possible war cycle for the U.S. The good thing about cycles, however, is this. If you know a cycle is coming up, you can take steps to counteract it, to minimize it through your decisions and actions if you're a world leader, if you're a leader in the United States even, because this is a U.S. cycle. But the question is, are we taking actions to minimize or counteract these directions, these cycles of the past? If there's going to be a major war in our lifetime, then astrologically speaking, this is the setup. The question now becomes, if there is, how should we prepare for it? In addition to what we should do to try to avoid it, what should we do what can we do to prepare for it? Well, you might ask yourself the same question: how would you prepare for a hurricane or a tornado? Or, as owners just explained to us before we actually began today's presentation, an earthquake that's devastating and not threatens, but actually takes the lives of thousands of people. Well, it's not like we're totally unprepared as a world population, because we've been in the era of terrorism since 9/11, 2001. This is still part of the age of terrorism, a cycle that's now 22 years old. Okay. But there's something else happening that's very important. And if we handle this properly, or if we handle this correctly or positively, can be even more important than the war aspects. In fact, it may even be these war aspects that is a catalyst to alarm us, if you will, or to spring us forward into actions and decisions that could not only avoid war, but lead us into what I would call a renaissance. So you can see that from this table I have here, this is the first time that we've had the three outermost planets entering new signs in such a short span of time, since the 1390s, the 1470s, basically the 14th century. You had it happen 4 times in succession. I'm sorry, from 1710, let's go back here, 1710 to 1738, it happened 3 times. There was a lot of things significant that happened then, and a lot was going on with Russia in the Middle East and Crimea and that whole area. I'm not going to go into that because I'm more interested in the time before that, because I think that's the cycle that has a lot of correspondences to what's going on today. And that was the 1395 to 1479 instance, when we had four occasions where these 3 outermost planets changed signs within 2 years. Okay, so it's very impressive what was happening then. And it's very similar to what's going on now. So as I say, it's more impressive and more similar to today's cosmic arrangement is the period of what was going on from 1395 to 1479. Okay, this list shows 4 periods during this time when the 3 outermost planets went into new signs. But I think there's even another one here that we can add, and that was 1446 to 1452. There were 2 different time bands during that period that would meet this criteria in the placement of planets, had remarkable similarity to what we see going on today, 2023 to 2026. So first, let's consider what was happening between 1395 and 1479. This was the beginning and the peak of the Italian Renaissance. Okay, and it was happening, as shown here, by these planets changing in our known solar system. Well, we didn't know these planets even existed at that time. But it was in the middle of the 15th century, 1446 to 1450. Could you put this down for me? Okay. It was during the middle of that time, 1446 to 1450, those 4 years, it doesn't show on this list here, that the cosmic comparisons to 2023 to 2025 are quite remarkable from a cycle's point of view. Thank you. So let's start with the astronomical facts of 1446 to 1450. Pluto made its first ingress from Cancer into Leo, a fixed sign, on August 17th, 1447. Now note that this was in opposition to where it is now, moving from Capricorn to Aquarius. That by itself is significant from an astrological point of view. However, equally remarkable is the fact that Neptune transitioned from Virgo to Libra, that same axis again, that Aries-Libra axis, on December 3rd, 1450, and also exactly opposite where it would be on March 30th, 2025, when it ingresses from watery Pisces into fiery Aries. And if that is not enough, Saturn conjoined Neptune in late September 1450, very close to 0 Libra. The same aspect will be present February 20th, 2026 at 0 Aries, almost exactly opposite position 1450. Uranus also made sign changes during this period. So one could say that the entire period from 1446 to 1452 was highlighted by the fact that the three outermost planets changed signs while Pluto ingressed into a fixed sign, and both Saturn and Neptune ingressed into cardinal signs. In fact, the Aries Libra axis. Okay. The Aries Libra axis is considered the universal degree, and that relates to all of humanity. So, was there anything significant happening in the middle of the 15th century? Actually, there was. Johann Gutenberg, for example, just happened to invent the printing press in 1450. Now, one could argue that that event, this invention, represented a revolution in communications, also known as, today is known as the printing revolution. Another important world-changing event that happened during that period was the fall of Constantinople, which occurred on May 29, 1453. The conquest of Constantinople was when the Ottomans captured the capital, thus marking the end of the Byzantine Empire as well as the Middle Ages, according to Britannica.com. And this is a statement made by Miles Hudson in that article. Many modern scholars also agree that the exodus of Greeks to Italy as a result of this event marked the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the Renaissance. And here's where it gets interesting, because this was when the Italian Renaissance led to a broader Renaissance throughout all of Europe, which marked the transition from the Middle Ages to the modern times. It was not only a rebirth in the arts and culture, but also in banking and currency exchange rates, where these new directions lasted well into the 17th century. Now, does some of this sound familiar to what's happening today? Think digital currencies. But that's not all. There's more. In fact, there's much more that's important here, but there's only time to briefly introduce you to another important concept in the grand scheme of things that is known as, well, I call it anyway, the supercharged degrees of the zodiac. This is when two outer planets form a conjunction, and then the degree of that conjunction becomes supercharged with the characteristics, with the nature of the planets and the sign involved in that conjunction. So the last part of this cosmic scheme, this grand cosmic scheme that I'm describing here, has to do with how these signs change, how these sign changes tie in with the new era. And I'm spelling era, A-I-R-A, for a very definite reason. Because on December 21st, 2020, is when the 20-year synodic cycle of Jupiter and Saturn occurred in 0 degrees of Aquarius, an air sign. And as you know, that wasn't just an ordinary 20-year Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, but also a 200 and 800-year cosmic cycle that officially got underway at that time. Between March 23rd, 2023, which is next week, and November 19, 2024, Pluto will cross back and forth over 0 degrees Aquarius 5 times. 0 degrees Aquarius 5 times. Now, what did we just talk about? We just talked about the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction supercharged degree was in 0 degrees Aquarius. So this is very important, the 0 degrees Aquarius we're going to be ingressing, seeing Pluto ingress into 5 times between now and the end of 2024, because it will conjunct that supercharged degree of 0 degrees Aquarius that happened December 21st, 2020, which is also a winter solstice, which is significant. So in tropical astrology, this does represent the start of a new era where the next 7 20-year conjunction cycles between Jupiter and Saturn will be in air signs, something that hasn't happened since for 800 years. And it's going to last about 200 years before it goes into the next element. So when a major planet crosses supercharged degree, where two other major planets conjoined in the past, it rekindles. Okay, it's going to rekindle the nature. It's going to rekindle the themes of Jupiter and Saturn in air signs. Okay, so that's very, very powerful. Okay. So you got the Pluto going into Aquarius on the same degrees that Jupiter and Saturn went into Aquarius. It's sort of like Pluto, Jupiter, Saturn, all combining with Uranus, the ruler of Aquarius. And so to understand 2023 to 2024, we have to combine the principles of all of these, Pluto, Jupiter, Saturn, and the sign of Aquarius, and its ruler Uranus. And that is quite a combination to try to contemplate, to try to understand. So let's begin by looking at Jupiter-Saturn themes in Aquarius from December 21st, 2020 conjunction, and the kinds of things that we indicated were happening at that time. So at that time in 2020, my view of these planets in Aquarius was that education is going to merge with technology as a new growth field. So this is the comments I made in 2019 going into 2020. I'm sorry, it was actually 2020. We're already going into COVID by this time. Okay, so education is going to merge with technology as a new growth field. Travel restrictions will not be lifted until then. And we're going to start seeing more exploration of outer space and colonies outside of the Earth over the next 120 years. We're already seeing these things develop, obviously. The other thing I want to point out is that Jupiter and Saturn are the planets that pertain to new laws. Jupiter and Saturn is justice. So with Pluto crossing this supercharged degree, we're going to see intense investigations into past violations of laws, leading into the enactment of new laws. Okay, we're going to see the old laws overwritten. And we already saw some of this happen, and I'm not so sure it's not going to happen again, because Pluto rules abortion. This big dilemma, this big conflict we're having between free choice and, right to life, I suppose it is, that others. So it's Roe versus Wade. Pluto rules abortions. So this is a political issue that's going to be very, very important over the next 2 years, 2023 and 2024. And it already started in late 2020. So this discussion, this polarity in American politics is just beginning. I mean, the overthrow of Roe versus Wade has created a tremendous upsetment, a tremendous conflict, if you will, in this country. It's going to be a very, very big issue, I think, in the 2024 election as we go forward here. But the point that I'm leading up to with all of this is this. We have two parallel paradigms that we're working through as humanity. One paradigm that you see here on the bottom is a path of destruction. That's one interpretation of Pluto. Okay, so it's a path of destruction and disconnection, which is Aquarius, from our collective human identity and psychological need to connect with one another in an intimate, heartfelt manner to another. So we have this psychological need to connect with, this is an ongoing thing. We have this psychological need to connect with one another in a heartfelt, intimate manner, but we're disconnecting from that. Right now, as Pluto goes in Aquarius, there's that disconnection going on. This path of destruction and disconnection is the shadow side of our collective identity. And Pluto can cast a very long shadow over our planet during this time. The other paradigm that's going on here, as you're seeing the outer part of this slide, is the paradigm of Renaissance in communications. This is the light part of humanity, if you will. Okay, the promise of Pluto as it continues to affect our humanity and evolve. In this case, Pluto in Aquarius pertains to the promise of innovation, discovery, the pursuit of freedom on both an individual and a collective level. In fact, you might say Pluto in Aquarius is the era of the power of freedom. If enacted positively, this combination of Pluto and Aquarius can unleash unimaginable innovations in human activity. The next 20 years can either be a launch into a brilliant future of invention and intellectual thought, which is synonymous with Aquarius, or it can be a plunge into tribalism. With Pluto, it can be either of these extremes, and it's going to be extremes. It's going to be one or the other because it's Aquarius. I prefer to believe the former and the more positive, and I know many of you on this webcast feel the same way. So in these cases, as I said, Pluto can represent both coercion as well as empowerment, pertaining to both individuals and the masses. So one of the themes symbolized by Jupiter and Saturn is that of justice. In Aquarius, it points to a collective desire for social justice. But what does that really mean? Is it going to be control, which is Saturn, over groups, which is Aquarius? Or is it going to be the empowerment of groups? Will meetings of people become prohibited by powerful leaders and governments? Or will meetings be allowed of groups of people where ideas can be inspired of one another that lead to these tremendous innovations and discoveries suggested by Pluto and Aquarius that are of benefit to humanity? So Jupiter and Saturn are two ends of extremes where controls are concerned. But when positively applied, when you positively apply the two ends of Saturn and Jupiter, you get a middle path between these extremes. With Jupiter, you got too much. With Saturn, you got too little. With the two combined, you can get it just right, and that becomes the path of moderation. So the path of moderation becomes the path of success, the path by which we can realize the higher principles, the higher promises suggested by Pluto and Aquarius, which is innovation, discovery, and renaissance. It has to be a path of moderation. If it's going to be a path of extremism, then it could be either or, with the great risk of reversion back to tribalism, primitive tribalism. So here on this table, you see the challenge to apply the principles of, to integrate the principles of Pluto with the principles of Aquarius. So here on the one hand, we have reform and transformation, trying to integrate with discovery and innovation. You got Pluto, which is the end of the matter, but it's in Aquarius, which is a new direction. So it really is a transformation from an old age into a new age. In popular astrological thought, this really might be the essence of the start of the age of Aquarius we've been talking about for the last 50, 60 years. We also have the principle of destruction and annihilation of Pluto combined with disconnection, dissociative of Aquarius. And we see so many people, losing their mind, if you will, giving up. I mean, the rate of suicide, the rate of mental illness is just escalating tremendously in our society here. And this correlates with Pluto going into Aquarius. At the same time, Saturn's going into Pisces, and you get this mental illness and this psychosis and this urge of some people to just give up and end their life. And this is the negative side of the Pluto part. This is the reversion part of going back to primitive fears. But it's also power. We got power here, and I talked about power combining with freedom. So it's an era of the freedom of power, or the power of freedom, as we as a society, as a world, move more and more toward the escalation, if you will, the opening up of human rights, of equality, of these principles of Aquarius, the higher principles of Aquarius, we get this freedom, and there's power that comes with freedom. It's not just power to the people, it's power to the masses. It really becomes an enlightening possibility here. But we have with Pluto coercion against one's will. I mean, there is still this element that wants to force groups to be quiet. There's this pressure to go against any kind of dissent, instead of looking at dissent as a possibility for opening up discussion to lead us into new laws, new principles to interact with one another. There is this force trying to prevent discussion, trying to prevent groups from meeting, trying to prevent free speech and free will. And this also talks about the threat to life, whereas Aquarius is willing to give life or die for a cause. So we're going to see a lot of these protests where protesters, such as in Iran and other parts of the world, are willing to put their life on the line to get equal rights, to get equality between male and female, if you will, between genders. There's so many of these conflicts that we got where one side feels repressed or marginalized, fighting to have their voices heard and their freedoms recognized. So Pluto wants to squash that dissent, but the protest for a collective right to dissent is growing. There is a deep need for involvement with Pluto, and yet Uranus wants to be detached and non-personal. Pluto wants to engage and confront, and then we got Aquarius, which wants to kind of give it up to robots. And we got to be very careful here, because we move more and more toward artificial intelligence, which is a key to much of the success and enlightenment that we have in the future. It can also become a mechanism to escalate dissociative behavior, disconnection from one another. So we got to manage this transition in such a way that we don't lose our humanity, our need for intimate contact with one another. There are investment opportunities with Pluto coming into Aquarius I want to talk about. There's many investment opportunities related to themes of Pluto and Aquarius. Okay, both the planet and the sign pertain to powerful sources of energy being discovered and put into use to benefit humankind. Our concept of energy is about to be completely transformed with these incredible new discoveries, such as a recent breakthrough in nuclear fusion to unlock unlimited energy source, limitless energy sources. We don't even fully comprehend. We don't even begin to fully comprehend what this is going to be about. It's just starting now. And they're talking about this is going to be 20, 30, 40 years away. I think people are going to be surprised how fast this is going to go. It's sort of like when you start connecting the genes of the DNA system. You start connecting these things and it starts going rapidly once the connections are made. So there's other fields where similar breakthroughs are likely in the field of artificial intelligence and electric powered automobiles and rail systems and other forms of transportation, because this is Uranus going to Gemini, and especially with Pluto in Aquarius in trine aspect to Uranus and Gemini. This is going to be an incredible time for investments. It's going to be a difficult time because money may be in short supply. And I'll maybe have time to get into that as we look at the North Node going toward Capricorn. It's going from Cancer to Capricorn, and that's where you start getting cash credit crunches. So there may be a lack of cash, but those who do have cash will be able to invest that into these inventions, into these fields of innovation that's going to lead to this renaissance and be tremendous investment opportunities. So you don't want to waste your cash right now. You want to start saving your cash. Unfortunately, you're now getting yield. You're now getting interest for the cash you save, something we did not see with Pluto and Capricorn. You got zero interest on your savings. Now, if you save, right now you can get 5%. So that becomes compounded by the time we get toward the end of this decade, which could be used at that time to invest in these super powerful investment opportunities. So I do think that you're going to find that the potential of Pluto in Capricorn to move away from harm and destruction into innovation and discovery can not only prevent the dangers suggested today that we're going through, but it can also create a new reality of a renaissance with tremendous financial investment opportunities. So I'm often asked with Pluto going into Aquarius here, if I think there will be a nuclear war during this time. And my answer, according to principles of Pluto in Aquarius, which is danger, destruction, rebirth, and Aquarius, which is nuclear energy, is yes, it is possible. There could be some nuclear destruction. There are leaders in the world who are willing to sacrifice the lives of their own citizens in order to maintain power over others. That's a reality. You cannot say it's not going to happen. It is a reality with Pluto going to Aquarius that the nuclear option could be taken by some of today's world leaders. But in the end, during this 20-year period following the Jupiter-Saturn synodic cycle on December 21st, 2020, and Pluto going into Aquarius 2023 to 2043, I think freedom, Aquarius, wins. That is, humanity will experience the power of freedom in the new era, AIRA. But it's not going to be pleasant. I don't think it's not going to be easy in the first 2 or 3 years here that we're into this. After that, after 2026, and maybe even a little later than that, but especially after 2026, when Saturn and Neptune enter Aries, forming that double sextile to Uranus trine Pluto, I believe the more positive attributes of Aquarius begin to gain light, that we will see the breakthroughs of innovation, scientific discoveries, personal individual freedoms that lead to a major renaissance, assuming we haven't completely destroyed the planet and the financial system, both of which are very vulnerable right now from 2023 to 2026.
Hello, Ray. Sorry to interrupt this fascinating presentation. We've got about 10 minutes left. So would you like this time for questions, or do we still have some slides to go? That's up to you.
I had slides if we had more time, but this is where I wanted to end it. This is quite good right here.
Wonderful, wonderful. So are you ready for some questions?
I am.
Brilliant, fascinating presentation. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okie doke. So we've got somebody asking here, would you say that in these difficult eras of war, that artists who are sensitive to these challenges bring on a new renaissance as a show of what's possible with peace?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you get Jupiter and Saturn going into Aquarius, and you look back at what happened 800 years ago when we started this 140 to 200 year cycle. Yeah, I mean, that was an age where the artists and the philosophers and even the financial banking system went through such a renaissance that it did influence the world. And so through art, through intellectual thought, through giving power to intelligence as opposed to accumulation of material things, I do think that is a very positive direction that lies ahead, and I wholly support the idea that that our attention and values shifting from materialism to art and intellectual thinking processes can be a catalyst for moving us from the threat of war into the realization of that we're all part of the same human family, all part of the same human race, and we share much more in common than we do in differences. And this polarity that we've been going through starts moving more and more toward the middle path, which leads us to that positive outcome that I talked about.
Wonderful. What a beautiful answer. Thank you very much. Austin is asking, which US horoscope do you agree with, Sibley, or which one? I know this is a matter of debate.
The horoscope I use for the founding of the United States is not July 4th, 1776. That was the date that the message was delivered by horseback to General Washington and the war started. The vote was completed just before noon on July 2nd, 1776. So it was 2 days earlier, and I use that chart just before noon, approximately 11:50 a.m. We don't know the exact time. We know it had to be somewhere before noon because it got announced in the newspaper on July 2nd, 1776. The vote was completed to declare a Declaration of Independence. So I use that chart, July 2nd, 1776, and that was when the moon was conjunct Pluto in 26 degrees, 25, 27 degrees of Capricorn. And of course, we talk about our Pluto return, but it wasn't just a Pluto return in that chart, it was Pluto conjunct the moon. And I think that too has a lot to do with the overthrow of the Roe versus Wade decision by the Supreme Court.
Wonderful, thank you. We've got a lot of questions coming here, so forgive me if we don't get to everybody. Going back to your point before, talking about money and cash, we've got a question here. Is it best to keep your money in cash now as opposed to stocks or other investments? Any notes on the credit crunch you touched on briefly?
Yes, I think this is a wonderful time and a positive time, and a time I would highly encourage many of you to start moving your money from a savings account into actually U.S. Treasury bills. It's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 1 year. They are yielding 5%. And we haven't had 5% yield since 2007. In fact, from 2008 to 2000 to just last year, 2022, 14 years, you got basically at best 0.25% from your savings. Now you can get 5%. And if you put it there for a couple of years and it compounds over, say to 2026 or so, when we see these investment opportunities really coming onto the scene, compounded, that's about a 25, 30% return on your money. I'm not so sure you're going to see the stock market increase 25, 30%. There are some things I think are worthy and positive to invest in right now in artificial intelligence that you can do. And I think there are some companies. One is PLTR. You may not like that one because it's run by a conservative individual, Koch, who was a supporter of Donald Trump, but now he's disowned Donald Trump. But there are some companies here in getting on the bandwagon of artificial intelligence. As you already know, the electric utility, the electric automobile industry is going to be taking off in a couple of years too. It's having a bit of a setback right now, but it's going to come back on again. So I think there's some investments you can make right now, but I would be putting a good amount of your savings just into T-bills and get 5% until we get through this. Till we get through this period where I don't think the economy is going to be doing much. Basically, I think the stock market is going to be trading between the low and high of 2022. So we're near the low right now. So I think you've got a trading opportunity. But in a couple of months, you're going to be near the high again. I think you have a selling opportunity. I think you'll see that go back and forth this year. So if you're a trader, you want to buy when you get these 3,000 or 4,000 point declines from the highs in the Dow. And you want to sell when you get 2,000 to 4,000 point rallies. But as an investor, I think I want to put most of my monies safely into U.S. Treasury bills. And you may be questioning whether that's even safe right now with the number of banks that are in trouble. Well, bear in mind this crisis we've had in the last 2 weeks is Mars square Neptune. It's the third and final Mars square Neptune. It's also the third and final Jupiter semi-square Saturn. And when Mars and Neptune are involved, in fact, it's Sun Neptune square Mars. When Neptune's involved, there is a tendency for hysteria. I don't think, I may be wrong, but I don't think this is as dangerous and long-term damaging as people are making it out to be yet. I think we're going to have a couple of financial crises here. This is just one of them. And it's going to go away, I think, in the next week or so. That's my opinion. But you got another one coming up when Jupiter squares Pluto, and Mars is going to form a T-square to it in late May. And Jupiter-Pluto is a classical financial crisis signature. It has a 4-month orb, and it doesn't happen 100% of the time. It only happens about 50% of the time, but we're getting it now, and we're within 4 months of it. But again, it's temporary. It's not long-lasting. I'm more concerned with what's going to be coming up probably after that 2026 period. When you go into the North Node moving into Aquarius and Capricorn, that is a cyclical correlation to recessions and sometimes serious recessions. So I think we're going to have rolling recessions. We've already had one last year. I think we've got another one coming up. I don't think we're going to have great growth. We're in a slow growth period, just like we were in the Jimmy Carter years, 1976, 1980, the last time Uranus formed its waning square to Saturn. Saturn formed its waning square to Uranus. We're in that same type of climate now. And I think it's going to, it's going to be a little bit better after the next election. But then I think we're going to have a crisis after that. And then it's, when we get this next Saturn Uranus, 2032, after that, I think we're going to a very, very good time, a very positive time for our economy and basically for socio-cultural issues too, where we're starting to coming together a little more.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Of course, there's too many questions here to go through, but there seems to be a common theme in the questions here about water. So what maybe could you say about free water that's happening as a form of free energy, or talking about water given the outer planet transits?
Water is in W-A-T-E-R?
Sorry, yeah, water, yeah, W-A-T-E-R.
What can I say about water? Well, okay, so water has a lot to do with the moon and Neptune, Cancer and Pisces. And now we got Saturn going into Pisces. Wherever Saturn is, there is a tendency to have a lack of the things that are ruled by that sign. So we are going through a drought period, and it probably is going to escalate during this time. So a shortage of water is happening. It is a problem. It's going to be a problem till Saturn passes Neptune, probably till 2026. So I think it's good to, be conservative when it comes to your use of water. And I hope governments and state governments, especially my state that I'm in, Arizona, and many of you in California, we're going through a drought, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. And even though we had more rain than usual this year, it's still not enough to get us out of the drought situation. So it's a concern. Water is going to be a premium. It's already, with Neptune in Pisces, water's become a premium, and Saturn's going to make it more of a premium because there's going to be a more of an awareness that there's a lack of water. So that's one area you might want to invest in is water, water filtration systems, water purification systems.
Thank you, Ray. And I think that's about time. So again, on behalf of KeplerCollege, we want to thank you so much for sharing your wonderful insights and wisdom with us today. And maybe quickly, I know we've got more questions here that we can get to, so I apologize to everybody, but where can people find you, maybe to email or ask questions or follow you? Where can they find you?
Yes, they can go to our website, www.mmacycles.com. MMA is Merriman Market Analyst, so mmacycles.com. You can find us there. And thank you for the opportunity to speak with Kepler and for your hosting this column. It's been a privilege to be here today, and thank you everyone for being part of this.